This is an introduction to paper space. Because of the differences between AutoCAD 2000 and AutoCAD Release 14, I'll try to use the least common denominator, which should work fine on Release 14 as well. You have become accustomed to generating geometry in model space, and so now we'll introduce basics of paper space. First of all, the system needs to be enabled by the tile mode variable. Simply typing in tile mode at the command prompt and putting in a 0 enables paper space. At this point, your model space geometry will disappear from the screen. This is not a concern. When you first enter paper space, you may want to consider establishing a border. Primary concern in paper space is to become accustomed to the fact that you are working in paper units or real world units. In other words, the example sheet is 36 by 48 and all dimensions are in real world inches. For example, if we were to generate a rectangle from 1,1 to 46,34, it would go to the edges of the sheet with a 1-inch border therein. Another example, the offset command with a distance of 0.5. Yes, 0.5 is 1/2 inch in paper units. Creates a borderline. Okay, the other concern is to be demonstrated is, like, for example, text. If you were to generate text for a title block area, you would use a real world height such as 0.5, 0.4, 0.1 being 1/10 of an inch. In this case, we'll use 0.5 as an example and just put in a couple of lines. Keeping in mind, everything is in real world units. To display portions of your model, you need to create viewports. Those viewports can then be scaled, and you can control the layers within. The tool for creating and controlling viewports is the mview command. Typing in mview at the command prompt asks us for the corners for the viewport. I'm going to pick a point in the lower left and use up about half horizontally, half vertically, and you'll notice our model appears in that viewport. I need 2 additional viewports. I'm going to represent the plan view contours in the lower left, the profile blown up in the top, and the 3D view in the lower right. Pressing enter to repeat the mview command, drawing a large viewport at the top, and yet again to create another viewport in the bottom right. Now you'll notice that we have our floating cursor is to the full extent of the screen. It goes to the absolute left, right, top, and so forth. We are currently in paper space within the paper space environment. We can switch to model space and work inside viewports. There are several ways to do this. There are toggles and so forth, but for now we'll just introduce the aliases of MS and PS. MS for model space. When I type MS and hit enter, you'll notice that my cursor is chopped off and I have fallen into one of my creative viewports. I can type PS to return to paper space to achieve a full crosshair. MS for paper space, and let's work on our lower left viewport first. First thing we want to do is control layers within each viewport. So simply issuing the layer dialog box, sizing it to the screen. You'll notice that there are additional toggles on the far right side. The one that we're most interested in is the current VP freeze. You're all accustomed to using the standard freeze on the left-hand side. However, to control the visibility of layers within viewports, you do the freezing on this side. So I'm going to select all of the layers, freeze all of the layers, then carefully thaw the contour and contour index on the far right column, which, as you can see, current viewport freeze. Choose OK, and you'll notice that all of the geometry except for the contour and the contour index is frozen in this current viewport. While we're here, we're going to set the scale of this particular viewport. To set the scale of a viewport, while you're in that viewport, you issue the zoom command, Z for zoom, and then carefully specify the scale as the ratio 1/60, in this case XP. Again, that is 1/scale XP. You'll notice that when I hit enter on that, it transfers to the 60 scale for this viewport. I can then pan the plan view into a desired center location. However, if I were to zoom in or out, it would cause this viewport to become out of scale. It's important that you note that once you set the scale of a viewport, do not zoom in or out, or it will cause the viewport scale to become inaccurate. Simply click on the top viewport. Again, we're going to control the layers thereof, highlighting all of the layers, freezing them in that current viewport, then thawing the profile layer in that viewport, leaves only profile visible. In this case, we're going to set the scale to a 20 scale, a nice large blow up. Z for zoom. Again, 1/scale, which is 20, XP. We have set our scale, and again we need to pan the drawing into the desired space. Lastly, the bottom. Again, layer visibility. In this case, we're going to freeze all the layers except the existing ground faces and the fill faces, 3D faces generated by ServCAD's contour dialog. Under the triangulate and contour dialog, you have the ability to turn on draw triangulation faces, and that is the tool that I use to generate those 3D faces. Now we're going to show how we're able to not only change the scale of a viewport, but also to be able to control the three-dimensional view thereof using the DD point command. I'm going to set my vertical to 30, my x-axis to around 315, choosing OK, and simply zooming in to achieve the desired results. The faces are quite dense, making it difficult to tell exactly what's going on, but we have a three-dimensional view of this fill area with the fill shown in this viewport. Important factors, of course, you could switch back to paper space, issue the dtext command, and annotate the scale of each viewport. You could do additional details in this, and having none of it affecting the model space area. Very critical point when you plot, issuing the plot command. The most important factor when plotting from paper space, regardless, is that the scale is specified to a 1=1. Do not put any inch marks or foot marks. 1=1 when you plot. Cancel. You'll notice that when we switch back to model space, tile mode 1, our model did not change at all. Switching back to paper space, we have our drawing ready to plot with multiple scales, multiple 3D views on a single piece of paper. Thank you very much.